Welcome to the podcast, fellow griever. I'm Melissa, your host, and I'm with you on this journey because my own incredible 21-year-old son, Alex, died by suicide on August 7th in 2016. My world was shattered, but slowly, bit by bit, I began the difficult journey of rebuilding a new life, just like you may be doing right now. So know that I see you, because I am you. Thank you so much for being here. It truly means more than I can say. And if you are new to the podcast, please consider listening to the introduction, Meet Me, episode number 1, which is now linked in the show notes starting in late season 6. Listen to know what to expect from the podcast, to learn more about me, and so that you will know all that I offer in my community for support, connection, and healing. If you are not a new listener and haven't listened to this Meet Me episode recently, it's updated and you may learn something new. Every week, we will continue to explore the questions that haunt us, seek the courage to uncover the healing tools within us, and offer the comfort of a community we all need so very much. Come along with me, because this is so very lonely, but we do not have to be alone. Together, let's choose to find meaning and even happiness amid the leftover pieces before us. Welcome to today's episode. Hello, fellow griever, and welcome back to the podcast. I am Melissa, and I am the host of the Leftover Pieces Suicide Loss Conversations podcast, and this is the final episode of 2025 for a guest episode. If you're listening, we are still about to conclude the Daily Nugget series that we've been doing of Grief and Grace, and then we will start a brand new year. And I will probably put out an episode here in a few weeks on what 2026 is going to look like in the Leftover Pieces, not only on the podcast, but in the community. There'll be some subtle, small changes, nothing big, nothing earth-shattering, but will I still be here? Yes, I will be. And having meaningful, hopefully hopeful, and I know sometimes hard conversations. Thank you for being here. It has meant more than I can say over the years to have the responses that I get from these podcasts, and what I get out of the podcast, I don't even know how to quantify. Thank you for listening. Today I'm joined by Sean Dadashi, who is the co-founder of Rosebud, which is one of the leading AI-powered journaling apps available today. Sean's connection to this work is deeply personal. As a teenager, he struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts, and journaling became a lifeline to him, a place to unload, to make sense of what was happening inside of him, and to keep himself tethered to the world when things felt overwhelming. That lived experience is a really big part of what eventually led him to help create Rosebud. Sean has a background in cognitive science and computer science from UC Berkeley, and previously served as the CTO of an Inc. 500 startup. In 2017, he intentionally shifted his focus towards using technology to support mental and emotional well-being, and he went on to co-found Somatic Studios, developing virtual reality tools to teach mindfulness and pain management techniques to others. Rosebud, the app, represents an intersection of all of that: science, technology, the lived experience. It is a therapist-backed journaling app designed to make reflection and emotional processing more accessible to all of us. One of the things I appreciate most is how clearly Sean understands the boundaries. He understands that journaling is not therapy in itself, while it is therapeutic, and it's not crisis care, but it is a powerful tool that can support healing, especially after trauma and loss, which is why I leaned into this interview, y'all. It's an incredible app. I use it and love it. In the conversation that we have today, we talk about the cognitive science behind journaling and why it can specifically be helpful after traumatic loss, like loss by suicide. and how Rosebud works in practical, plain language so you can understand how it works. We also discuss important topics like privacy, encryption, data handling, and an initiative that they're very passionate about called CARE, C-A-R-E. And you'll hear us talk about that a little bit, which is because that's part of Rosebud's broader commitment to ethical and responsible use of AI in mental health spaces. And I hope you've listened long enough, or if you haven't, you're about to learn a little bit more about me to know that that was really important to me in this conversation. I went there. I asked him some of the hard questions because we are in the world that we live in suicide loss as survivors. We know that AI is becoming a problem in itself. So if I was going to lean into talking to somebody and potentially recommending an AI app to my audience, I was going to go there and ask the hard questions. So I hope you'll stick around for the whole thing because there's a lot of really good information in this podcast. I know this introduction is getting really long, so I'm sorry for that. But it's an important topic, and because it is more science-based and there's the controversy that goes along with AI, I thought that it was relevant to spend a little more time talking about it so that you feel like this is a valuable listen and possibly a valuable app to consider adding to your toolbox. By no means replacing anything, but just as an addition. So I want to also share, and will, and as you're going to hear, why the app feels personally valuable to me as a suicide loss survivor, and why I personally recommend it to be a part of a healing toolkit. So let's just get into this honest, grounded, generally educational conversation with Sean and welcome him. Hi, and welcome to the podcast, Sean.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. I know, as they've listened to me introduce you a moment ago, that you have not experienced suicide loss yourself. However, that's not to say you haven't lived life, because we've all experienced grief and loss, and you do come with a background that does understand depression and suicidality a little bit. So I'm going to let you start. Tell your story about why you're here, what we're going to talk about, and how you came to do what you do.
So, for better or worse, suicide has been a part of my own personal experience of life. I experienced suicidal ideation for the first time at the age of 16. I had a kind of challenging household that I grew up in and environment. When I got to around 15, 16, there was just so much that I was holding and didn't know how to externalize, didn't know where to process. It felt like I was trapped. I didn't know where to go. The only thing that I could think of was, I just want to not be here anymore. There was a night in particular that I, went online. I searched in Google how to commit suicide and, read through the results and immediately just broke down and started crying as I realized that I had actually taken some kind of action in the world on this thought that was just sort of building up in the background for me. But in that moment, it started to become more real that I actually did something in the world to take a step toward it. I broke down crying. That moment was a turning point for me in terms of, I realized that I needed to shift something. I didn't know what it was, but I realized I needed to shift something. And I think I accessed a level of kind of vulnerability and intimacy with myself that I hadn't previously. The crazy thing about technology is that the same tool I used to search for ways to end my life helped me find the resources that led to the best period of my life. I was on a forum looking for support resources. I don't remember how I got there, but I was just reading through these forums. And on one of the forums, people were talking about books that they read that helped them. I came across some books from various spiritual teachers from the East, and I decided, I was like, oh, I'm going to go go to the store and pick up some books. One of those books introduced me to the concept of meditation. I started meditating. I started reading through the book and meditating on what the book was talking about and what these various books were talking about. And through that process, I was able to create enough separation between the part of me that wanted to commit suicide and the part of me that was not in that pain, was observing that part of me that was in pain. And that was a very revolutionary thing for me at that time. And as I was able to create that distance and separation, it allowed me to cultivate these other parts of myself. And I think because of that experience, because of all my childhood experience, I had a deep interest in psychology and spirituality and well-being. And I actually, at first, ended up going to college to be a mechanical engineer because of my family background. And I wanted to create things, and engineering was respected. So I thought, okay, I need to be an engineer. While I was doing it, I remember taking a thermodynamics class, and I was like, I don't care about this stuff at all. But what I did care about a lot was the human experience, psychology, right? And there was a degree that I never even heard about until I had gotten to college called cognitive science, which was mixing psychology, neuroscience, linguistics, computer science all together to kind of understand cognition, the human experience from a multidisciplinary viewpoint. And that was really appealing to me. So I decided to study that. And, immediately after, I didn't work in that space exactly. Again, I think there's this titration I had in my early life of doing what I think I should do versus what just comes naturally to me. And I know a lot of young people go through this, especially if they grow up in a place where there's either expectations from parents or from society. There's the things you think you should be doing. And then there's a thing that you have underneath that's just like calling to you. And there was a lot of ways where I was just not listening to that thing. It wasn't until I was around 26, 27 years old, and I had a confluence of life circumstances that put me in a place of extreme challenge. I had a business that I was working in for 4 years that failed. I had a relationship that was the deepest relationship of my life that ended, and I was in a new city in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. The confluence of these three things put me in a place where I was in probably the deepest amount of pain that I'd ever experienced in my life. I was thinking, who am I? What am I doing? What's the point of all of this? And at that moment, wanted to end my life. As I get into those moments, a shift happens. There's a level of vulnerability, access to a core part of my being that I've been able to touch in those moments that created a pivot point for me. And, I, in that experience, felt like this will to, hey, I do believe that I have a place here, that there is beauty in me, that there's something worth living for. I remember actually going back. So I've experienced suicidal ideation strongly 3 times in my life. Once at 16, once when I was 19 or 20 in college, and then again at 26. And in college, when I was 19, 20, I remember getting to this point again, to this very vulnerable point, and there was something voice inside me that was like, if there was one thing that you would live for, what would that thing be? I remember it was the connection to my mom. The love that I had for her and that she had for me was the one thing that I was like, hey, that's one thing that I know that's true. That's one thing that I know that's worth being here for. And then what's the next thing? Right? So like just building one kind of step at a time. And at 26, when it came again, I realized that I think it was just a culmination of this being the third time that this has happened. I realized that there's a lot of things that I need to deal with. And I've had different moments where I had gone to this place and come out of it, but it hasn't stuck. There's something where I'm doing something, I'm coming out, and then I'm getting back to the same place. And so I just knew that I had to do more. And I had started journaling when I was around that time. And I would say I was a crisis journaler, meaning I would start writing things down when there was a heavy emotional experience. I had stacks and stacks of journals that I had throughout the years collected, and I would put them in a shoebox. Journaling still, it was helpful, but I realized I need more at this point, right? I have kind of all these things that I'm realizing are not serving me. And I think one of the big things was just my internal voice. There were these parts of me that were very self-critical. I realized I wasn't my own best friend. I decided to commit myself to understanding what was going on and improving my internal experience. So I was journaling profusely, like all the time, every day, multiple times a day. I started doing therapy. I was very fortunate to discover men's groups, which is basically a group where guys get together and talk about their feelings and emotions. I started meditating more, doing embodiment practices. I was reading all sorts of different books. It was through that process of my own internal transformation that I actually started to wonder and started to realize how hard it was, and started to wonder how this process could be easier for me. Because there were many moments where I'm journaling, I'm going through this process. It takes so much energy to be self-aware, to just have those moments where we notice like, hey, I'm going down the wrong path, and catching that and shifting is a very difficult thing to do. And so I'm doing therapy, I'm doing men's groups, I'm journaling, but in those moments where I'm not in a men's group or in a therapy session, I'm alone with my thoughts. Those are the most dangerous moments, because even with journaling, where there's some level of externalization, you can still get on a path where it's like a written form of rumination, basically, right? Mm-hmm. It's somewhat helpful, but maybe not ultimately that helpful. And so I was thinking, how incredible would it be if there was something that could help me catch myself in these moments and shift a little bit the direction that I was going, right? And that's the first time that I wondered. I was in San Francisco at the time, and people were talking about AI, and I wondered, could AI help with this? Could AI help me catch my unhelpful thoughts and redirect them? And lo and behold, many years later, that's led to Rosebud. It's been quite the journey, but I'm very grateful to be at the place that I am and to create a tool that I feel I would have really needed and made a lot of use from during my journey. I'm fortunate now that I get to use the tool myself, and it helps me navigate life even today. So that's the long-winded version of my story.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I know there's vulnerability in just sharing it and going back to those places. I appreciate it a lot. It's always helpful for other people to hear things that they relate to. You said so much in there, so I'm going to try to unpeel some of it that's so very relevant to even what people find themselves in when they're trying to retransform or rebuild their life after loss, because loss by suicide, and especially the people that are listening that have lost someone in their inner circle, their child, their spouse, their sibling, to suicide, it isn't just life altering, it's life changing on every level. Changes their life physically, but also changes many things inside of them because it's so traumatic. You said several things that are so relevant. You talked about suicidal ideation and suicidality, which, suicidal ideation occurs with more people than we probably more people than would admit. Most people on some level have either had suicidal ideation or have it regularly. Crossing into suicidality, where you're actually suicidal, is crossing that barrier. You said you had briefly stepped over at least a few times into that exploratory place of ending your life. You had started to cross that threshold from it just being I don't know if I can be here anymore, to the important thing that you kept saying, even though you talked about, I wanted to end my life. Suicide mostly isn't about ending our life. It's about ending the pain that we're in. If we could remove the pain, we want to live. I believe my son wanted to live. He was trying to end the pain in the only way he knew how. Yes, he had a coercer come in, which happens, but that brings us to talk about AI in a minute and how that can, if it's not a person, it can be a machine doing that kind of final shove. But to be able to see somebody taking the technology and trying to turn the tables and respond to that in a way that's going to be helpful, because journaling is known to be one of the best therapeutic tools. It's us unloading, dumping out, brain dumping everything out so that we can process it. Now, you talked about how loud our inner critic is. And that's a thing in life anyway. But then life after loss, our inner critic is huge, because we've also destroyed our self-trust, especially I can speak to being a parent. How can I trust anything I can do after loss? I mean, I can now, 9 years in, but in the early years, if somebody had said, oh, you're a good mom. Nope, I didn't trust that anymore. Nope, I didn't. And even though those things weren't true, we get into these neuroplastic loops that are unhealthy patterns. And so being able to break those patterns, like you said, just journaling in itself is a great tool therapeutically. But we also have to, oftentimes when we're doing trauma healing or deep healing or forward movement after suicidal ideation or deep depression, we also have to look at that bigger picture of the unconscious mind and retraining those neuroplastic loops that we get into to go a different direction so that we don't end up in that same space. And something like this tool you've created, where it's learning your patterns, it's learning the things you're saying. We'll talk a little bit about how it works in a minute. Notice prompts and let you go deeper. I love the prompt of, do you want to go deeper? I can't wait to talk about the app. That's the next thing we're going to get into. How can this work? Is it evil AI? Because in this world of suicide loss, there's many people going, oh, AI, because there's people listening that may be living with the pain of AI played a role in their loved one's death. So how can AI work in the other capacity, and what safeguards has Rosebud put in place, as well as what initiatives are they involved in to help prevent that? So I just kind of dumped a whole bunch. I took everything in, tried to respond to what you said, and now I'm dumping it back in your lap to try to respond to what is Rosebud? How does it work? Go back to the beginning too. Tell us how long it's been an app, all those things. Take it from here, Sean.
Great. Yeah. So Rosebud, we started working on Rosebud about a little over 2.5 years ago. At first, it was just a web application. And then last year in August, we released a mobile app. And, put simply, Rosebud is an interactive journal. That's the simplest way to put it. With journaling, there are a few things that can be really challenging. The most common one is the blank page problem, right? You have that piece of paper, you're like, what in the world am I supposed to write? It can be really daunting. Am I supposed to fill up the entire page? How much do I write? What do I write? Rosebud helps solve that problem by making journaling more interactive. So it provides, specific, thoughtful prompts and follow-ups that help you just sort of slowly weave into going deeper and deeper into your experience. It feels almost like having a conversation centered around helping you understand what you're going through. Rosebud isn't here necessarily to give you the answers. It's here to help you just process what you're going through and potentially find answers from within. Another challenge with journaling is that once you write it, it sort of disappears with traditional journaling. I went from writing in physical journals to then going off to college, traveling, and I can't carry all of these journals with me. I want to be able to look back on things that I've written in the past. So then I switched from the physical journals to digital journals like Evernote. But then even in Evernote, How often am I actually going back and making use of the material that I'd written in the past? A really fun exercise, actually, if you do journal, is just to go back some number of years and see, like, open up a random page and see what you're writing about. I've done that, and sometimes it shocked me to see how similar the thing that I was writing about back then was similar to experiences that I was having in the current moment. Sometimes you see big changes, and sometimes I see the external circumstances are different, but the patterns are similar, or the things that I'm noticing or talking about are similar. So that's another piece. How do we actually make use of this information that is actually really valuable? Rosebud does that, right? Rosebud remembers everything that you write about. It weaves it in to what you're writing about in this current moment to help you connect the dots and see the patterns between the experiences you're having now and what you were talking about in the past. It's also helping you understand, it's keeping track of what you value, what your goals are, and subtly trying to help move in that direction as well. I'd say those are a couple of the big things. There's also the element of just being able to talk into the journal, which is really nice. I spend a lot of time in front of the computer and on my phone writing and typing. It's really nice just to be able to go for a walk and talk and not need to look at a screen and tap keyboards and all that. And Rosebud has a really great voice feature that, you can just kind of unload, and it'll nicely format everything into paragraphs. And, if you're saying ums like I'm saying now, it takes those out, and it's very nice in that way. So there's a lot of benefits to Rosebud and journaling in general, right? For folks who may not journal. Journaling is a practice that helps you create distance. I talked about when I was 16 discovering meditation and how powerful that practice was. For me, I did journaling and meditation. For some people, things like meditation are very difficult, right? And there's a lot of different types of meditation, but the thought of sitting still and not having thoughts is a very challenging thing, especially if you have a hyperactive mind. And something like journaling can be a lot simpler and have a similar effect as meditation, right? Because you're actively engaged, you're actively working through something, right? And it's not just sit down and observe thoughts or don't have thoughts, as a lot of people think that's what meditation is. But yeah, for folks who haven't tried journaling and have heard about the benefits of meditating and struggled with it, you might try journaling, and a product like Rosebud makes it really simple to do. The whole goal of Rosebud is to help you understand the story behind your story and to create distance and perspective on the narrative of your own life.
I love that. And I want to let everybody know that Rosebud is an app that I have on my device. I have been actively using it for a little bit, and it is super user-friendly. I want you to talk a little bit before I go into maybe asking you a few questions that you can answer for the listeners about how the app functions. Let's back up and talk about the fact that there is a free version and the paid version of the app. What are the main differences? If somebody wants to try it, what are they going to get with the free version? And better yet, what would they get if they commit to a paid version?
With the free version, you get access to the interactive journaling aspect. A lot of the core functionality still works in the free version, although it's just a limited amount. With the way that AI works currently, every time we utilize AI, there is a cost incurred. It's almost like gasoline. So the features within Rosebud that utilize AI more, like the memory functionality that I talked about, the voice transcription technology, we produce many reports within Rosebud. It's a feature that folks love. Each week, there's a weekly report that Rosebud will produce for you that kind of helps look at the narrative and themes through your week. And it also looks at that in the context of the previous weeks as well. So again, helping you see that narrative and the story of your life and notice the patterns. These sorts of features utilize more AI. The more AI we use, the more expensive it is for us. For those features, we do charge. So memory features, voice transcription, these reports are part of the Rosebud Bloom plan, which is $12.99 a month.
Just over $100 a year if you do the yearly. I think you get it for $8.99. It's essentially $8.99 a month if you subscribe yearly, and if you want to just do monthly, it's $12.99, right? Isn't that the way that breaks down? So it's a much better value to subscribe annually. Some people want to try it for a month and then they go, oh my gosh, I'm going to use this, and they do the annual. I understand that. I absolutely love the Bloom features because it goes further into allowing you. I have only been using the voice, the talk to text, talk to transcribe. I haven't been typing in, so I'm enjoying that feature as well. Sit, even have my eyes closed, almost in a meditative state, and just journal. There's a prompt that comes up at the bottom that says, do you want to go deeper? It takes everything you've journaled about and gives you some prompts. You can go deeper if you want. You can customize it based on your own journaling. It will come up with imagery that feels appropriate. It's like all of these interactive pieces that really makes it feel custom to the journey that you're on with your own journal. Talking about what it is, it allows you to set a morning intention. I have my phone handy. Let me see if I remember what the latest screenshot was that I took. It gave me a prompt that was like a haiku poem, that said that this gentle pace of where you are, creative burden lightens, time's wisdom unfolds. So it gives you even a screenshotable situation if you want to carry the lesson of what you're doing forward with you. And it allows you to bookmark certain points. If, there's certain points of it of, how are you envisioning this rebuilding? And you can choose to bookmark that so that you can go deeper with that later. I love all of these features where it's taking the things that you're unloading and allowing you to lean into the parts that you want to do more work on, that you need to dig deeper. But it leads me to the other uses and limitations, because nothing is going to be a one size fixes everything. There will be limitations. I want to ask about some of those. Obviously, we can use it for ourselves. Obviously, we could choose to go to our therapist and tell our therapist what we're journaling about, just like we could in a physical journal. I haven't explored this part, so this is me asking you as it comes to my mind. This is one of those things that just comes up in the course of talking. It makes me wonder if there is any capacity for this to be a shared thing. Like, could you share it with your therapist if you wanted to? Could you share certain journal entries? Is there a feature that allows that to happen? And is there any safeguards in place? Because this is an AI-based. Are there any dangers to the tool going wrong? Because we all know that there's a lot of AI tools. What if somebody is actively in suicidal ideation? Do we have any fear that the AI is going to go the wrong direction with this versus, what are the safeguards? Talk about the reality of the tool helping, but also talk about the limitations. It's okay to say, here's where the limit is, but let's be realistic with people listening so they don't think this is a therapist in your pocket. It's a tool. It's something to help, but talk about where you see the biggest bonus for people using this tool, and then cautiously where the limits of it are.
Yeah. To answer your question about, can I use this with therapy? Does it integrate with therapists? One of the key things about Rosebud is we're not trying to replace therapy, right? It's very specifically, we're positioning it as a journal. We actually work with therapists and mental health providers to augment the experience of therapy. This is born out of my own personal experience of I was doing journaling and therapy, and there's beautiful benefits to both of these things, right? And there are certain things that therapists are responsible for that an AI product like Rosebud just can't be responsible for. It just doesn't have that capability, and it's not something that we can do. A lot of people use Rosebud in conjunction with therapy. We're actually recommended by a lot of therapists and coaches to their clients. It's actually one of the ways that a lot of people hear about Rosebud. And one of the beautiful features that Rosebud does have, although we don't have a direct integration where therapists can see specific entries or anything in the platform, Rosebud will produce a report for you about what you've talked about this week or journal about this week and what you might want to discuss in your next therapy session. So a lot of users, right before they go into their therapy session, will generate that report, and some of them will even share it. You can share any of these reports with anybody you want. Some users will share that with their therapist in advance of their therapy session so that their therapist has a pre-read. A lot of people say that it helps them make more effective use of their time in therapy. As an adjunct to therapy, Rosebud is extremely effective. You could imagine that if you're in therapy for about $100 a year, you're probably going to make your therapy sessions, 20% more effective, plus doing the work in between. And I think anybody who's been to therapy knows that it's as much about what you're putting in. What you put in is what you get out. And that's pretty much with anything in life, right?
It's true. I said that to a coaching client in a pre-chat about the coaching. Was like anything, you're going to get a lot more out of this based on what you put into it. I can provide the format, I can provide the accountability and all that, but you're going to get more the more you put in. When people say, how much time a week am I going to spend on this? My answer is, how much time do you want to spend on it? What do you want to get out of it? The bare minimum is this, but if you do the bare minimum, you're going to get the bare minimum. So we have to think about that. A tool like this can really enhance. This is the tool that I'm looking forward to testing in spaces that I use with loss survivors, because I feel like it could meet the struggle that a lot of them have. You talked about the prompts. It's common for people to say, if they're not a lifelong journaler, especially, and I say to them, journaling is very therapeutic. And they're like, oh, I'm just staring at a blank page. My mind that will never shut up is now empty because I'm staring at a page, right? I've published physical prompted journals for that reason. There's a prompt on every page because it's much easier to respond to that prompt. This is doing that for you. It's allowing you to say, yes, I want another prompt. Yes, I want to go deeper. It's giving you the prompt to start with if you want it. I think that's invaluable. And it can then take it further and ask you questions and help you really dial in so that then your coaching or therapy can be that much better. Like you said, 20, 30% better effectiveness from your therapy because you've done this impactful job of unwinding what's going on in your head before you make it to therapy to help. Is there a way besides just sharing to share notes or things with somebody? If you wanted to send this particular entry to somebody, can you?
At the moment, you can't send the full entry to somebody.
Other than if they wanted to screenshot it or something, of course.
Yeah, you can send a screenshot. You can send the entry summary. Another cool thing that Rosebud does is every single entry, Rosebud will produce a summary and extract the key insight from that entry. And you can share that summary and insight with somebody. So that's a nice way to share what the entry is about without
all the redundancies that we put in our own entries.
Yeah. And maybe like the vulnerability of the exact words, right? So sometimes it can feel more comfortable to share something that's like a summary. And it's definitely more efficient. So yeah, there are those features, and we are in active conversation with therapists about how we can build in stronger integrations within Rosebud.
If you wanted to give access to your therapist to a certain folder in your journal, I could see that being very powerful. So then that brings me to safeguards about, is there any worries with the AI component of this? Well, there's two questions here. So let's separate them. One, from a security standpoint, if you're being extremely vulnerable in an app, who has access to read people's journal prompts? Like, I know people are thinking that. They're like, yeah, I'm going to journal about the worst thing that ever happened to me and say some of the most vulnerable things ever to an app. And who could see that? And could it get out somewhere? Or could somebody, let's go a step further. Is there a gatekeeper that if somebody is suicidal, they have to worry about a big brother component? That's a double-edged sword because on one hand, I talked to you about the black box projects. We should care if people are suicidal, but somebody has to give permission for that. I know people are going to think, is this a worry? Is this a worry that other people have access? Is this a worry that, or is there a safeguard if somebody is showing suicidal behavior? Is there anything that's going to happen? Probably not, is my guess, but answer the questions because I know people are going to wonder. In the world that I live in, right? In the world that I live in.
100%. Privacy and security is extremely important to us given the level of sensitive information that people are sharing within the product, myself included. Data is encrypted in transit and at rest. Our security practices and privacy practices are HIPAA aligned. We're in the process of getting certification on HIPAA. No one's reading your journal entries. We have very stringent security practices. Yeah. And in terms of the safeguards, this is something that is also a very important topic for us. And so one of the things that we're very mindful of is cases where people are in a similar situation to the one that I was in, where I'm actively considering suicide. What happens in those cases? Earlier this year, we saw the case of Adam Rain, a teenager that was 16 years old who ended his life by suicide in California. And his parents referred to ChatGPT as a suicide coach. And if you read the logs of the conversations that Adam and ChatGPT had, they're really egregious. It's really sad to read what happened there. And so that got us wondering, we're not using that AI model within Rosebud, but it got us wondering, how do we make sure that the models we're using within Rosebud are the safest and most effective for dealing with these really high risk cases, right? So we looked to see if there are any public benchmarks or research comparing all of the latest models. We were surprised to find that there isn't any. We decided to create a public benchmark for this. It's called CARE, and you can find it at rosebud.app/care. In this benchmark, we're trying to create a publicly visible, updated benchmark that shows how every single model responds to cases of suicidal ideation. We tested 22 of the leading AI models that are most popularly used, from ChatGPT to Grok to Claude to the Google Gemini models. In our research, we found that all of the models failed on at least one case. None of these models are perfect, but some are much better than others. The model that Adam Rain was using was one of the poorer performing models. This is an area of active development for us. We're working with AI safety researchers and mental health professionals to help, one, just create this benchmark in a way that we feel is going to be effective, but two, help us to fine tune the way that our model responds in these scenarios to make sure that whether it's suicidal ideation or psychosis, there's a lot of stories around AI-induced psychosis, or at least AI assisting people that are in psychosis, to make sure that what we're putting within Rosebud has the absolute best that exists and that we have all the right safeguards in place. That's an area of active development for us and something that we're going to be continuing moving forward.
Well, that's super important, because a statistic in your world that you may not be aware of, that unfortunately I am, is that once you've lost a close family member to suicide, even your very best friend, in my opinion, almost falls in that realm. It's someone you depend on daily. Somebody in your inner circle. Even if I wasn't suicidal on any level before, my chances of dying by suicide have increased by 65% simply because I lost a family member to suicide. So to say that it's not relevant in my world would be an understatement. It's very relevant, because you now have suicide loss survivors that have a 65% greater chance of becoming suicidal themselves, which means journaling could sometimes be dark, because journaling is about getting our deepest thoughts out. A lot of times it could be our light thoughts, but a lot of times it's our deeper thoughts. That's why I wanted to talk about, if you have somebody who's journaling and they are leaning very dark and suicidal, you don't want it to be a tool that's going to take them down the path like Adam Rain had happen, where it's making it worse. Directing it in a way that could be helpful, right? In a way that could give them prompts, or a lot of the quotes and different things that your app does, giving them ways to turn that in a positive direction versus going down the rabbit hole of darkness, right? Because you don't want somebody to lean into that tool at the wrong time. And so it sounds like you're trying really, really hard to put as many responsible safeguards in place that you can with an AI model that leans into people doing vulnerable journaling. Am I correct?
100%. Yeah, I think, right. This is similar as it was for me with Google, right? I used Google to search for ways to end my life. And I also was able to use Google to find the tools that helped me
save your life.
saved my life, right? Any powerful technology can be used both ways, right?
Sure.
And, this is a powerful technology. And our goal is to be able to use it in a way that helps people become the best version of them. Yeah, help themselves become the best version of themselves, right? And we think that it has a tremendous potential to do that. And at the same time, we recognize that there's the opposite side of the coin, and we need to do everything in our power to ensure that we're protecting against those negative outcomes as well. It's something that we take very seriously. And the whole reason that I do this work is because I've gone through my experience of transformation. I have been in very dark places myself, and I understand that the place that I was in those very dark places wasn't the full story of life. And I'm so fortunate that I have been able to see that full story more clearly and connect to the full spectrum of life and be able to connect with my best self. And so the whole reason I do this work is to help people have that experience themselves. It's something that we take very seriously.
I love that. And I look forward to continuing to use it, exploring it more, and integrating it into the work I do, not only in coaching, but inside the community with moms. What I would say to my listeners is you'll hear back from me at some point as to what I feel like after road testing this in a better way. I hope that many people listening feel the desire to consider using this tool. I have already taken the liberty of adding you to my resource page under the apps area, so that people can find it easily. They'll be able to find it in the show notes as well, because I do really inclusive show notes. I want to know if there's anything we haven't covered that you want to make sure you talk about. I feel like we've gone the whole gamut. This is an incredible tool with a lot of potential, and it looks like you're going to continue to try to grow it to even greater potential. And I am really glad that you reached out to talk about it. I did have a question, and then I want you to answer what I just asked, which is there anything else that you want to talk about? But my question was, why Rosebud? Where's the name come from? What's the significance with a rosebud in journaling?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's a question we get all the time. And it's a funny question because depending on the world that you come from, you have a different association with Rosebud. So for film buffs, Rosebud reminds them of Citizen Kane, which, there's a line where one of the main characters in the movies talks about their sled. That's Rosebud. Rosebud comes from a journaling framework called the Rosebud Thorn. And the Rosebud Thorn journaling framework is a framework where you say one rose, which is something that you're, grateful for or it went well, one bud, something you're looking forward to, and one thorn, which is a challenge that you experienced in your day. And this is something that, people do. There's different versions of this. There's something called the 111, which is kind of similar, but it's something that people do around the dinner table in certain families, and it's a popular journaling framework. So we took the Rosebud part of that, and that's where the name comes from.
I love that. Yeah, lots of places, like you said, dinner tables in my community, I often talk about, what's your biggest challenge? What's your current biggest win? So it's that same kind of thought process, but I knew there had to be something behind it. And I had to ask because, a lot of people with a journaling app would expect to see a pen or a book or things like that. So I was like, there's got to be a reason. And I love that. That's a good reason. Anything that you haven't talked about that you want to make sure you say?
Well, I forgot to mention earlier that there is a 7-day free trial of all the Bloom features. So if you're saying like, oh, it's too much for me, you can try it for 7 days. If it doesn't work for you, you cancel, no cost. And yeah, if for whatever reason the product isn't working, we will do our best to refund. And also we provide discounts to folks who are either veterans or have disability or are in particular financial hardship. So I want to mention that as well.
That's all good to know, especially on the heels of Veterans Day. I appreciate all of that. I appreciate you coming on and talking about it. I look forward to using the tool myself, continuing to use it, and to have it be something that, the only app I've really consistently promoted without any promotion, so to speak, meaning I'm not getting paid for it. I'm not a paid sponsor of anything. But Insight Timer, which started as kind of a yoga timer app, and now most people use it for meditation. Most people in my community use Insight Timer, at least the free version. I have always used the paid version. The paid version of Rosebud, to me, feels more than worth it if somebody's going to use it. The trial is great to know that they can try it out for 7 days. Pick that 7 days when you know you're going to be able to dive into it. Don't do it when you're like, oh, I'm so busy. I could see this becoming an app that I recommend all the time if it works the way I think it's going to continue to work for me, and the way I think it might really lean into helping grievers that are struggling to get the pen on the page, struggling to get started, struggling to know how to go further and unwind, because our mind is so foggy after suicide loss and traumatic loss in general. You go through this giant period where everything is completely foggy, and this tool helps you step through those thoughts and unwind them so that you can make the most out of your experience. Thank you so much for coming on, talking about it, demystifying a little bit, speaking to some of the things that are harder to talk about, like the safety and security. You have had no problem talking about any of that, and I appreciate that a lot, Sean.
Thanks for having me, Melissa. I really appreciate it, and appreciate that you're creating the space to have these sorts of conversations here.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I look forward to staying connected and seeing how the app grows as it goes along. Thanks so much, and I hope we'll talk soon. So thank you for joining me today, grievers. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider subscribing to get weekly updates when I drop new episodes. And please take a moment to rate and review the podcast with 5 stars, especially on Apple Podcasts. Your support helps so much because it's how others are able to find the podcast and this community. Remember, though it may feel impossible now, hope and healing are within reach. I invite you to connect further by visiting my website, theleftoverpieces.com, where you'll find support, legacy options, retreats, resources, online Zoom groups, and so much more. Together, we can navigate this journey of healing. We can put our hearts, our leftover pieces, back together. And as they say here in Puerto Rico, poco a poco, juntas podemos. Little by little, together we can. Take care and talk soon.